and welcome. My name is Frank Anderson, and I'm excited to be here today. I'm excited to talk to you a little bit about this really, I think it's an amazing course, honestly, called The Integrated Therapist. I have to tell you, I was quite surprised by doing this course, being a part of it, because I learned a ton. I learned so much more than I thought I would have learned from this course, being the moderator and the one that kind of put it together with the team at PESI. And interestingly enough, it has changed my practice. I really do things differently now as a result of this course. So I'm excited for anybody who's interested in joining this, seeing this. And let me just tell you a little bit more about the course so you can see why I'm so excited about it. I have to tell you, when the people at PESI said, hey, you want to do this live stream? I'm like, yeah, it's going to be easy for me to do a live stream. And the reason it's going to be easy is really because I do love this course. Okay, so what we're going to do is this. I'll give you a bit of an overview, and then if anybody has any questions, they can feel free to ask me some questions, and we'll do, I'll just go from there. So this is a course that I think, boy, a year ago, I thought, wouldn't it be really cool to do a course to integrate different forms of therapy? Because when I go out and talk to people, and I do talks and workshops primarily on IFS, right? I'm always saying to people, I believe every therapist has their own model. I think every therapist pulls bits and pieces from everything that they learn and create their own model. And oftentimes people feel like guilty if they're integrating things because some of the leaders who hold these models, there's like, you have to do it this way, you have to do it this way, you have to do it this way. And in some ways, honestly, I was one of those people. I was this kind of all in IFS person. And it ended up not feeling really true for me because I think I do use a lot of different elements. I was trained in EMDR, for example. I was trained in sensory motor psychotherapy, where everybody uses elements of cognitive behavior therapy. So I just kind of thought, wow, wouldn't it be cool if we can integrate? I was thinking, looking at the comparing, contrasting elements of different models, right? Some models move really well together or go really well together. Other models seem on the surface like they're a difficult fit. But in fact, that was super surprising for me here with this course, is that it wasn't so difficult to integrate things like DBT, for example, and IFS, or even CPT, cognitive processing therapy, and IFS. That was something that everybody thought, oh, wow, this is going to be a really interesting discussion. But there was so much more in common with these models than any of us ever thought. So that was super exciting for me. One of the things that I honestly hold is that, especially as it relates to the treatment of trauma, every model's working on the same exact neurobiological dysregulation that is occurring within our nervous system and within our body. So, right, it's the same neurobiological dysregulation. So, whether you're going to use EMDR, which is one of the courses that we talk about with Debbie Korn, or you're going to integrate some DBT, which is Lane Peterson talks to us about that in this course, or CPT, as I mentioned, like cognitive processing therapy, whatever model you're thinking of using, you're accessing the same neurobiological dysregulation. So it makes sense to me that at one point through the trauma treatment, your client might be kind of dealing with more memory processing. And so maybe EMDR makes sense at that phase of the treatment. And then at another point in time, for example, say they're noticing a lot of stuff coming up in their body, and that maybe sensory motor psychotherapy would be a better integrator during that phase of the treatment. So depending on what phase of the treatment somebody is in, you may pull bits and pieces from these different models. And so I thought it would be great to have us put them together for people so they're not feeling, I would say, a little bit guilty, like they're doing it all on their own in secret because you're supposed to be doing this model or this model. And I do think I think there's this model competition in a way that I'm not really crazy about and I'm not a big fan of. Why do you have to do it only the IFS way? That's not the only way to treat trauma. Same thing with, EMDR or nothing. I just don't believe in that. I think each one of these models offers something really unique and has a big contribution to the treatment of trauma. Otherwise, they wouldn't work. These models grow and expand because they work, right? So I'm excited about it. We ran this course, I think, in the spring. It was so successful, we decided let's run it again so that more people have the opportunity to learn how to integrate these different models of therapy. So I've already mentioned EMDR. I mentioned sensory motor psychotherapy. Janina Fisher talks about that with us, which is great. Janina and I are dear, dear friends for many, many years. Loved talking to Debbie Korn. She's an EMDR consultant and has written several books. Debbie and I also go way back, so it was great to talk to the ways Debbie Korn, interestingly enough, integrated a lot of IFS into the way she does EMDR. So it was kind of a natural fit, which was surprising. People really thought there'd be a lot of differences between EMDR and IFS, but Debbie incorporated a lot of IFS, the ways that it was traditionally different. She's expanded that model in a beautiful way that incorporated some basic IFS principles, like let's get permission from all parts before we do an EMDR protocol, right? And yes, everybody, if we're using resourcing, which IFS doesn't use a lot of resourcing, Debbie Korn's, because she knows IFS, says, why don't we resource self-energy instead of a protective part? I thought, beautiful. I'm all for that, right? So Debbie Korn talks to us about EMDR integration. Lane Peterson, too. I have to tell you, he's somebody who teaches a lot about DBT or dialectical behavior therapy. I didn't even know that much about it. I used to do it years ago in my residency, but Lane was really able to help me. I didn't even know what dialectical meant in IFS terms, polarity or conflict. It helps people with conflicting feelings, conflicting thoughts, conflicting issues, which I thought was great. I thought DBT and CBT were very similar. So it was great for me to learn the differences between what DBT really has to offer, the ways it's useful, and what it's not useful for. Like in some ways, DBT gets people ready to do trauma processing. And for the more severely traumatized people, like people with dissociative identity disorder, DBT is a great model to get people kind of ready to do the trauma processing and ready if they have more severe symptoms. So it was a great adjunct to IFS. And then Kate Chard is, oh, it was lovely. Kate Chard and I got along really well. She does the cognitive processing therapy, and boy, people were like, "Oh my God, this is going to be there's going to be battle here between Kate and Frank because these models are so different." Wasn't true at all. We had a great time talking together. There was more similarity than we thought there were. It was interesting because it's different wording and different terminology talking about the same issues. So, for example, I talked about IFS. We talk about um, prefrontal. I'm sorry. In IFS, we talked about self-energy, and cognitive processing therapy. Kate Chard kept saying, "You need the prefrontal cortex online. You need the client has to be in their prefrontal cortex to be with their traumatic overwhelm experience, feelings, thoughts, and sensations." So she used prefrontal cortex in the way that IFS talks about self-energy. So it was very interesting. Similar constructs, different terminology. And the models were different in a lot of ways. I mean, there are some differences, which I'll talk about in a little bit. The other very interesting model was through AEDP, Accelerated Experiential Dynamic Processing, which is Diana Foch's model. And Carrie Glazier did a really great job. She's one of the faculty members at the AEDP Institute. And Carrie, somebody who expanded the AEDP model to include parts. Like, who knew? AEDP is an experiential relational model. IFS is internal attachment model. And I thought, oh, how are these two going to work together? I wasn't sure about that. But Carrie expanded AEDP to include parts in self and dissociated parts. So that was a beautiful integration and weaving of those treatments. And then last, there was, which I was super excited about, a dear friend and colleague of mine, Dr. Elizabeth Call, or Libby Call, talked about integrating psychedelic medicine. Libby and I did IFS treatment together way back, I think in 2004. So I've known her for a long time. She also was an EMDR consultant, but has gotten really excited and interested in psychedelic medicine. So I thought it was a great thing to teach people and to teach people and to have Libby share her expertise on how she's integrating all the different psychedelic medicines with psychotherapy in the treatment of trauma. And she said there's no kind of shortcut for good trauma treatment, but she really taught us how integrating, say, a session of ketamine or a session of MDMA or a session of psilocybin in the midst of trauma treatment is really useful. So intermittent adjunctive psychedelic sessions can really help move parts that are really stuck, that parts that can't move forward, or clients that have really difficult access to getting in touch with self energy. So it was really great to have that piece, which was the talking about the integration of psychedelic medicine, which I know so many people are interested in and excited about. And, MDMA is going to be available within the next year or so, but ketamine is already accessible and available. So people are doing ketamine sessions. So it was great to hear from her on that. And then one of the things that was so exciting about this course was it kicks off with me interviewing Dick Schwartz and Bessel van der Kolk. So you guys get a really beautiful hour of Dick and Bessel talking about trauma treatment. And, that was a very lively discussion. And again, Dick has his way of doing things and has a very passionate view about IFS and the way it works. And Bessel, who I've known since 1992, honestly, because Bessel, I worked with him at the trauma center way back when. Two of my mentors, honestly, was very cool to have them in the same room together. Bessel is very much an integrated therapist. He doesn't believe in one particular model. He thinks, all models have value, especially when they're rooted in neuroscience, which has been the vast majority of his career. So it was great to have a discussion with the two of them. I think that their discussion, was rich, and such a joy. I think we'll be watching that videotape for years to come, honestly, because there was so much knowledge between the two of them and what they've shared in the treatment of trauma. It was invaluable in and of itself. And one of the things I'll say about the discussion with Bessel and Dick was it was really surprising to me because Dick will often say IFS is not phase-oriented treatment. Bessel van der Kolk was one of the people who discovered phase-oriented treatment, along with Christine Courtat and Judy Herman. So I was really excited to see how that discussion would go. Much to my surprise, Bessel said, I don't really believe in phase-oriented treatment anymore. He's like, every time you get in a room and talk to a client, you're starting your treatment. There's no phases. It's kind of an artificial thing. He said, back then, that's what we thought, but the field has evolved so much that it's no longer a phase-oriented approach, which I thought was really surprising. And so they were another place where the two of them agreed instead of disagreed. So that is a quick overview of this course. I hope I hope you enjoy it if you're deciding to do it. I think it's really a great product. I think we showed ways for people to easily integrate, even if you're not fully trained in a model. So I would often ask each speaker, what pieces of EMDR could somebody use? What pieces of CPT can somebody use? What pieces shouldn't they use, right? Same thing with AEDP. So you'll walk away with like the do's and don'ts of integration after you see this course. So yeah, I wonder, I'm looking at the time and I wonder if there's any questions. I'm really open. I see there's a number of people here. So I don't know if anybody has any questions. I'm happy to answer any questions for any of you that have that. I think there's a way that you can put the questions in, and we could see if Rachel will help us bring the person on the screen if anybody has questions. So if not, no big deal. But if you do, I'm happy to answer any further questions that people would have. No? Okay. Doesn't look like there's any questions. So thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. Like I said, I'm excited about this course. I think it's really valuable. It has changed my practice, and I believe that it will also change your practice for the better if you're able to integrate bits and pieces of what each of these models have to offer in the treatment of trauma. And of course, the backdrop of how to incorporate internal family systems in this whole thing is also super helpful. I do a beginning kind of intro to IFS for those of you who don't know IFS. And at the end, I do a recap of pulling all the pieces together. So again, thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a wonderful day and check out the course because I think it's really amazing.